Picture this. You're a young bride named Margot. It's 1347, you're 15 years old, and you're about to marry a man twice your age who you've never even kissed. But here's the kicker. Your entire village is going to watch you consummate your marriage, examine the bloody sheets afterward, and if there's no blood, you're basically branded a prostitute and could literally be killed. I'm not making this up, people. Welcome back to the channel, and if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button, because today, we're diving into the most absolutely unhinged sexual practices of medieval times that make modern dating look like a walk in the park. So let's talk about Margot, our 15-year-old bride from 1347. She's standing in a stone cottage, candlelight flickering around her, wearing nothing but a rough woolen shift, and Henrik, this 30-year-old man she barely knows, is approaching her. But here's where it gets absolutely wild. This isn't just about two people getting married. Oh no. The entire community has a stake in what happens in that bedroom tonight. I'm talking about neighbors, church officials, and even ancient superstitions all crowding around this poor girl's most intimate moment. This is medieval intimacy, folks, and it was shaped by religious terror, survival instincts, and some of the most bizarre beliefs you've ever heard in your life. Now get this, privacy in medieval times. That concept literally did not exist when it came to the marriage bed. Your wedding night wasn't some romantic, private affair. It was basically a business transaction that had to be sealed with bodily fluids and witnessed by your neighbors. Yes, you heard me right. Neighbors would literally demand evidence of sexual activity. They would drag couples to their chambers, undress them in front of everyone, and then wait outside listening for proof that the deed was done. Can you imagine your most intimate moment becoming community entertainment? But wait, it gets even crazier. The church had their grimy hands all over people's sex lives too. They literally created a doctrine that said even married couples could commit mortal sins in their own beds. Saint Jerome, this super influential church figure, taught that loving your wife too much was basically adultery. Then comes Thomas Aquinas in 1265, and this guy literally created a rule book for married sex. He specified exact days, seasons, and positions that were allowed. Only missionary position was acceptable. Anything else would damn your soul to hell. Oral sex? Absolutely forbidden. Sex during menstruation, pregnancy, or breastfeeding? Banned. They calculated that married couples were only allowed to have sex about 50 days per year. 50 days! That's less than once a week. And speaking of women, medieval understanding of female sexuality was absolutely bonkers. Medical experts, and I use that term very loosely, believed that women were basically defective men. They thought a vagina was just an inside-out penis, and that ovaries were internal testicles. But here's where it gets really twisted. They believed women needed multiple climaxes to conceive, which led to the horrific conclusion that rape couldn't cause pregnancy because there was no pleasure involved. So if a rape victim got pregnant, she was considered partially responsible. The victim blaming was real, and it was deadly. Then there's this thing called wandering womb theory. Medieval doctors literally believed that a woman's uterus could just start wandering around inside her body, causing hysteria, madness, and even death. I cannot make this stuff up. They thought your reproductive organs were just casually taking strolls through your torso. Meanwhile, there was this whole underground world of fertility beliefs and folk medicine happening. Village-wise women who actually knew something about herbs and contraception were being branded as witches and burned alive. These women were secretly brewing pennyroyal and tansy teas for birth control, creating mandrake root amulets for fertility, and even forging fake roots to sell in medieval markets. Women would pray to Saint Margaret while simultaneously burying their afterbirth and wearing crucifixes while hiding amber to prevent miscarriages. Talk about covering all your bases. But the contraception methods, absolutely terrifying. Women were jumping backwards 7 times, drinking wine mixed with ground bees, and consuming mercury and lead potions that were often fatal. They were literally risking death to control their own fertility because having another baby could mean starvation for the entire family. Now let's talk about virginity, because in medieval times, it was more valuable than gold or livestock. The wedding night wasn't just about intimacy, it was about verification. Those bloody sheets I mentioned earlier, they had to be displayed publicly as proof of the bride's purity. If there was no blood, the bride would be returned to her family in disgrace, branded as a prostitute, and could literally face death. Some clever women figured out they could prick their fingers or hide chicken blood to fake it, but the medical ignorance was staggering. They thought the hymen was this solid membrane completely blocking the vagina, which shows is how little they understood about female anatomy. Church courts would actually investigate these situations, examining women's bodies and interviewing couples about their most intimate details. The humiliation was unreal. And remember, they only allowed missionary position because anything else was considered damning to your soul. Woman on top? That violated male dominance. Rear entry? They considered it bestial. But here's the tea. There were underground stories called fablio that revealed people were secretly experimenting anyway. Andreas Capellanus wrote in 1184 about sophisticated practices among the nobility that were completely hidden from the church. If you were caught, you faced excommunication, exile, or death. And y'all, they literally believed in sexual demons. Succubi and incubi weren't fantasy. They were accepted medical and theological facts. The story goes that these demons would collect semen while in female form, then transform into male form to impregnate women, creating cursed or demonic children. Sleep paralysis was interpreted as demonic sexual assault, and women who reported unexplained experiences were accused of consorting with demons. The victim blaming never ended. Menstruation was treated like a toxic waste situation. They believed menstrual blood could kill crops, sour wine, drive dogs mad, and dull knife sharpness. Menstruating women were banned from churches and food preparation, forced to live in special huts outside the community. The church taught that menstruation was God's punishment for Eve's original sin. The medical treatments were barbaric, bloodletting, purging, and they actually prescribed sexual intercourse as a cure. Meanwhile, women were secretly sharing knowledge about moss, cloth rags, and sheepskin protection while tracking lunar cycles and hiding herbal remedies. When it came to sexual compatibility, they had these wild theories about astrological and humoral matching. You needed the right balance of hot, cold, wet, and dry. They would examine women's hips. Wide hips meant fertility, narrow hips meant barrenness. They analyzed penis size and shape for compatibility, like they were examining livestock. It was clinical and dehumanizing. The church also had theories about spiritual compatibility and blood kinship that could lead to marriage annulments if family connections were discovered later. Male sexual prowess was directly linked to reputation as a warrior and leader. Impotence was public humiliation that could destroy a man's standing in the community. For women, the slightest sexual impropriety could destroy marriage prospects forever. Just talking to a non-related man could get you branded as a prostitute. The legal system reflected these double standards too. Rape was considered a crime against the male owner, not the woman. Punishment varied by social status. Adultery carried the death penalty only for women, while men had sexual freedom with unmarried women, prostitutes, and servants. There was this whole courtly love tradition that elevated sexual desire to a spiritual quest, but it was mostly lies. Terror fantasy for nobility entertainment. They believed true love could only exist outside marriage because marriage was purely economic. Some communities practiced bundling board, where potential couples would sleep clothed together with a wooden separator to test compatibility. Pagan fertility rituals still happened secretly. May Day celebrations led to sexual experimentation that resulted in February birth surges 9 months later. The conception theories were wild too. They believed in dual seed theory, where both men and women produced seed for pregnancy, and female orgasm was considered necessary for conception, which had tragic implications for rape victims. They thought lunar phases influenced the child's sex, and that star positions at conception affected personality and future destiny. The surveillance systems were intense. The church had informant networks where neighbors reported on private lives. Confession became an intelligence-gathering operation where priests collected intimate sexual details. The Inquisition tortured people for confessions about religious and sexual practices, using detailed interrogation manuals filled with sexual questions. Prison punishments were horrific. Women in standing cages until they starved to death. Public castration before hanging for men. There was hidden sexual literature and instruction, but it was only available to physicians and the wealthy. Common people learned through whispered conversations, folk songs, and trial and error. The church created catalogs of sexual sins with hundreds of practices and corresponding punishments, which contradicted their official celibacy positions. Medieval people found ways to resist and express their sexuality despite overwhelming oppression. Human sexual desire proved too powerful for complete control by authority systems. Love and intimate connection continued despite the dangerous political nature of sexuality. These practices emerged from complex interactions of religious doctrine, social structure, economic necessity, and genuine human need. So when we return to Margot in that candlelit cottage, we understand her terror as the weight of an entire culture crushing down on her most intimate moment. The same tensions between desire and control that existed then still exist today. Medieval sexuality teaches us that the quest for sexual freedom is an ancient human aspiration, and even the most bizarre and oppressive practices couldn't completely suppress the fundamental human need for connection, pleasure, and love.